Student journalists at a major university have filed a federal lawsuit to protect their First Amendment rights on campus. Are your kids learning, or are they being indoctrinated on their college campus? That next on Significant Insights. Hello, welcome to the program. Good to have you with us today. You know, when we send our children off to college, it's with the hope and the prayer that this costly education will expand their worldview and broaden their perspectives. But is this happening? More and more, we hear stories of conservative voices being silenced on college campuses. In fact, CNN host and Time columnist Fareed Zakaria recently spoke about this, saying, American universities these days seem committed to every kind of diversity except intellectual diversity. He went on to say that conservative voices and views, already a besieged minority, are being silenced entirely. One example of this happened last November on the campus of the University of Illinois in Urbana. There, an anti-Trump rally was held, co-organized by the Black Rose anarchist group. Now, according to research online, this group seeks to destroy capitalism and overthrow the state. At the event, which you'll see footage of, it's alleged that spokesman for the group and a U of I instructor, Tariq Khan, assaulted conservative journalist Joel Valdez and destroyed his personal property. Joel was reporting on the rally for the organization Campus Reform. Here's video from that altercation, with much of Mr. Khan's language removed because it's simply not suited for television.
Hey, so Donald Trump, you guys.
He's still your president.
And we ain't scared of you little snowflakes, okay? I'm gonna go tear down one of your flyers right now.
I'm scared of you, 50-year-old man. Don't you have kids to look after?
What you say?
That's him, not me.
You threatening my kids?
No,
You wanna threaten my kids? Huh? You wanna threaten my kids? Say something again. Say something about my kids again. Say one more thing about my kids. What are you gonna do? Huh? You gonna kick?
Not so tough anymore, are you, little boy? Not so tough.
What did I say? What did I say there was a threat? He didn't hear a threat.
Yeah, you better check yourself, okay? Check yourself. I'll you up if you threaten.
Call the cops. Call the cops. Call the cops.
What are you gonna do, huh?
What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? You wanna threaten some kids too?
We never
You wanna
threatened your
threaten some
kids,
kids?
bud.
Threaten some kids.
We never threatened your kids.
That's a good look. What kind
I have it on video what he said.
Since the incident, students had hoped that some disciplinary action would be taken against Mr. Khan, but rather than seeing the students as victims, the university issued them restraining orders to prevent them from reporting on Tariq Khan. In response, the students and their attorney, Noel Sterett, have filed a federal lawsuit for violating their right to free press, free speech, and due process. Attorney Noel Sterett and student journalist Joel Valdez join me today. Tell us, Joel, what happened.
Sure. After attending an anti-Donald Trump rally, I wanted to get the perspective of other students, and what ended up happening was a violent instructor, as you saw in the video, stole and broke my phone, and the university protected him for it. I think it's very disturbing that the university sides with these violent instructors instead of the actual victims in this case.
So it was an anti-Trump rally. You went to the anti-Trump rally and had conversations with some of the people who were there protesting, giving another perspective?
Yeah.
How did some of the other students respond to that, some of the other participants in the anti-Trump rally?
Initially when I had a few conversations with them, they were giving me their perspective on what they thought was concerning about the Trump presidency, and I gave them my perspective on why I think it's a good thing.
And that's normal discourse. That's normal.
Yeah, that's normal conversation that we
normal,
have.
Whether it's debate, argument, that's part of the process.
Yeah, although it's
or
becoming
it used to
very,
be part of the process on the campus.
It's becoming very rare on college campuses these days, and you see more and more of people like Tariq Khan who don't want to have the discourse and will preach a no platform tolerance or more
Now,
like an
who is
intolerance.
Tariq Khan?
Tariq Khan is a graduate instructor at the University of Illinois.
So then what happened? How did he enter into the picture?
He was one of the organizers of the event, and after he had gone up and gave his speech, he came over and confronted Blair and I, who were recording the event, not trying to be at the spotlight of their protest, but he ended up making it when he grabbed my phone and broke it and ran after the fact that we had told him we had called the police.
So he knew who you were?
Yeah, he actually had done previous research. I remember initially the first time that I had met him was at a student government meeting, and he came up to me and told me that he knew who I was, even though I didn't know who he was.
What was the purpose for saying, I know who you are?
It was disturbing when I heard it, but it sounded like he wanted me to be scared.
Yeah, he wanted you to know that he was a professor, he was the guy in power, and that you were a student and you were on his list.
It sounded like he wanted me to know that he was watching me.
Yeah. So at the meeting then, Professor Khan was enraged that it was, his response was pretty abnormal. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. I had repeatedly asked him, what threat did he hear? Because that's definitely not how I or any reasonable person watching the video interpreted what I had said to him. But again, I repeated to ask him what he thought, and he didn't have an answer. And I knew he didn't actually think that it was indeed a threat. He was looking for an altercation to happen.
You know, one other question about that. Is it typical for a professor at the school to organize anti-rallies?
You know, you would think that it would be the students who organize these rallies, but Tariq Khan, who's a graduate instructor, was known for being one of the most politically active activists on campus. And when you go to these protests, you see that it's equally numbered between undergraduate students and either professors or instructors or TAs. There's a wide mix.
So the professors are actually leading the way.
Yeah, they encourage students in the classroom
and
to
encouraging, and to some degree indoctrinating.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. I remember I was actually speaking to a student who was in one of Khan's classes, and she had told me that if you go along with what he says, and you don't necessarily challenge him on his ideology, that you'll have an easier time in the classroom, or you'll have an easier time in gradings.
Yeah.
But if you're one of those students who challenge him, someone like myself, you're not going to have a good time.
So you're a journalist, and you write for the Campus Reform newspaper. How has that affected your journalistic efforts?
You know, with the university, after they gave us these no contact orders and censures, it made it really hard to report, because essentially what it says is that we can't have any contact with Tariq Khan or a third party. You know, if a third party goes and talks to Tariq Khan, it could implicate us in violating that contact order.
And you can't. Did they also say you could not write about him?
And this is one of the most disturbing parts of our lawsuit, is that the assistant dean, Ronnie D.A., had told me and Andrew that if we wanted this story to die down, wanted to go away, we shouldn't report on it, or we shouldn't tweet about it or go to the press. It's very disturbing when the university tells us that we shouldn't be reporting on these issues if we want them to go down, if we want them to go away and die down.
Were there any threats with expulsion or anything of that sort?
You know, there were a lot of unwritten rules in these policies. One of them in particular said that we can't be filming in a public area where there's a public protest that Tariq Khan is in. Nowhere in these no contact rules in the university's code of conduct says that we can't do that. And they're trying to get us with these unwritten rules to basically trip us up and disrupt our education.
Noel, it all sounds pretty restrictive, and it really sounds pretty dangerous in terms of free speech and First Amendment rights. So where is the basis, what's the basis of the lawsuit that you have filed?
The basis is the First Amendment. It's a robust law that we've had to protect the individual from government that would set out to repress either the freedom of speech or the freedom of press. Those are foundational to our country. We need to be able to talk about the political issues of the day, and we need to be able to report on them, both of which our students were engaged in. And if we're going beyond even telling the students, well, you can't speak here, you can't say here, to also saying, and you can't even report on what others are saying, because that's really what is deeply concerning about this case, is that Tariq Khan and the Black Rose, Antifa, anarchist type groups are very dangerous, don't hold the Constitution in any high esteem whatsoever, seek anarchy, seek to overthrow the system as they see it. And if student journalists in this country can't even report on it, or are put in a situation where they're discouraged from reporting on it because they know that the university could suspend them or expel them for violating these no contact orders, we're looking at a situation that is very grave. Reporters, those on the news, need to be able to report, and student journalists have no lesser rights.
We'll continue our discussion on the First Amendment right after the break.
And really, if you're a conservative group and you're silencing liberals, or a liberal group silencing conservatives, it's really exposing the fact that you're not that confident in what you believe, and you believe that the only way to win is by silencing and not permitting the dissent.
Welcome back. Today we're talking about the importance of the First Amendment from the framework of a lawsuit filed on behalf of student journalists at the University of Illinois. Now, it's alleged that Tariq Khan, a U of I instructor and one of the organizers of an anti-Trump rally, assaulted Joel Valdez, one of the student journalists, and broke his cell phone. The U of I took Mr. Khan's side and issued restraining orders against the journalist. Let's continue the discussion with Joel and his attorney, Noel Sterett. Would you describe yourself as a conservative?
Yeah.
Do you feel that a lot of this has to do with a very liberal bias and a prejudice against conservatives, conservative students on campus?
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely a type of witch hunt that the faculty and students, especially in the student government, are looking to bring down conservative students and activists like myself. But what's unique about this case is that we're student journalists, and so it doesn't just apply to conservative students, it also applies to our friends in the other side of the aisle. It's really dangerous, the precedent that it sets, that the university does this to journalists, because it means that any university in the country can do it as well.
What has been the school's response?
Well, I think the students worked and were trying to be very responsive to the university's alleged concerns. But after the students really got nowhere and realized what they were doing was they were caught up in this web with the no contact orders in place, these basically being vulnerable to Mr. Khan's allegations or accusations at any point. They could be brought in because Mr. Khan says, oh, well, I saw them on campus, so they're violating the no contact order. When we realized that we weren't getting anywhere through the students, we filed the lawsuit. It's in that context of the lawsuit being on file that we can often have a much better reception when we speak to the school. And so now
have you since had conversations with the school?
Yes, and so now the ball is in the school's court. They didn't release anything publicly yet, and it sounds like it's under attorney review. My hope in all of these cases, because nobody benefits from extended litigation, is that the university will see that the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, is not a conservative issue or something that they should be threatened by.
Well, it would appear to me that there's two issues here. And the one issue is that if a university wants to recognize and honor the First Amendment with its students, then it's not terribly difficult to do that if the leadership of the school makes that clear. But if the core issue in that university is an ultra-liberal leadership in that school, then you're going to have to be fighting these battles all the time.
I would agree. And if your ideas, if your ideology, or whatever you're teaching the students, can't withstand the dissenting voices that conservatives bring to the table, or whoever the minority is. If you're at a conservative campus and you have liberal students, really what you're saying is my ideas are not strong enough to endure the challenge of having a dissenting voice. America exists because we said, you know what, the First Amendment is there and we need to protect this so that we can have a marketplace of ideas on our public school campuses, in our public squares, where we can wrestle over these ideas. We can all disagree, but it's a volatile situation because these are very important issues. And really, if you're a conservative group and you're silencing liberals, or a liberal group silencing conservatives, it's really exposing the fact that you're not that confident in what you believe, and you believe that the only way to win is by silencing and not permitting the dissent.
Or that you're so arrogant that you believe that nobody else's opinion counts.
True. That's another option.
That the dissent doesn't count. But the ironic part of this is that the universities, many of them, would pride themselves on the fact that we're here for exploration of ideas and so forth. But in reality, that's no longer happening. Joel, you're conservative. Are you a rare bird on that campus?
You know, I think there's a lot more conservatives on campus than you think, but when you have the university defending the actions of violent instructors and, you know, liberal students, a lot of them don't want to participate in campus politics or in political.
The liberals
clubs
certainly
in
don't have
general.
a problem.
Oh no, they feel very comfortable in their
because
spaces.
they are protected by the university.
Absolutely,
And the conservatives are not.
Yeah, when we do our own activism events, our members fear that there will be another Tariq, that there will be another instructor or student that comes up to us and, you know, assaults them or assaults their friends. You know, a lot of our members were scared after the incident happened, especially how the university responded, which was with no response, that we aren't going to be protected.
The liberals are not afraid of the repercussions if they speak out, because to some degree what I'm hearing is that they're protected by the university and you're not. Con can lower your score and get by with it. Other things, I'm sure, on campus could happen. Does that mean that your group's not speaking out, that you're afraid to speak out now?
I mean, we're never going to be afraid to speak about conservative ideas. I think it's really important that we exercise our First Amendment right and make sure that we show them that we're not afraid to do so, because it's protected by the Constitution.
And if they try to repress you, that they're going to have to, there's repercussions that they're going to have to pay a price for it.
And I think a lot of the times on other college campuses, I mean, most recently when I went to Turning Point USA's Midwest Regional Conference, we had students from all across the Midwest coming up to us talking about how they faced similar repercussions on their college campuses, and they asked us for advice, and we told them to stay strong and make sure that they don't back down to these people who are trying to suppress their freedom of speech and their right to write about it in the press. So we wanted to make it very clear that we're not backing down because we have the Constitution on our side. We know that for sure. And it just shows how vulnerable they are when we expose what they're doing.
We want to note that we invited the U of I administration to comment on this incident, but we've not heard from them. Dr. Wes Modder talks about having the courage to stand right after the break.
Today you can have courage. Today you can stand. And when God puts His finger on you, when God calls you to do something that you don't think you can do, I think it's really important for us to trust in the Lord, to be brave.
Today on the program, we talked about conservative student journalists who are standing up for their rights of free speech and free press on a campus at a time when conservative viewpoints at universities are being silenced all around the country. Dr. Wes Modder, lead pastor at Stone Church in Orland Park, Illinois, had to fight the government over his right to practice his religion as a chaplain in the United States Navy. He talks about the courage to stand in today's final thoughts.
In the military, we have core values of honor, courage, and commitment. And now as a retired military officer, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. Honor, courage, and commitment. We can see that in Scripture with a man named Gideon, who God decided to use. Gideon was hiding in a cave. He was in the smallest tribe, poorest family, youngest kid, and yet God decided to use him as the deliverer. He probably felt very unqualified. Sometimes it's said that courage is simply fear that said its prayers. And one of the things I enjoy about Judges 7 is this story where God uses and tests Gideon. There's 132,000 people, army warriors that Gideon had. And God said, no, I don't really want you to do that, because then I'll think that you are self-sufficient and you'll think that you're able to defeat this enemy. So what God did is he wanted to peel down this army to 300. And he did it in an interesting way. He said, those that kneel and those that stand. Those that kneel are disqualified, and he sent them home. And those that stood on their feet were used. Probably in my mind, if God were to use me this way, I would think there's no way that I could possibly do what God's calling me to do. But here's an encouraging word to you. Today you can have courage. Today you can stand. And when God puts his finger on you, when God calls you to do something that you don't think you can do, I think it's really important for us to trust in the Lord, to be brave. What I think is happening right now in America is that God's sifting America, that there's a sifting happening across our country. And I believe that God is sovereignly removing people who are not his true followers. There's a Midianite remnant that's occupying America. And today's calling and today's challenge for us today is to be a part of that 300. Would you today agree in your heart that you can have the courage that Christ gives each of us, so we can have courage to do the right thing? Even sometimes it's the most difficult thing. I'd like to pray with you. Would you pray with me briefly? Father, thank you that you have called the church to be your people, your remnant. Help us, Lord, to have courage. Help us, Lord, to take a stand. Help us, Lord Jesus, to believe that you are able to deliver us into your glorious kingdom because of the finished work of Jesus on the cross. God bless you.
You know, I think one of the lessons, maybe a couple of lessons that are to be learned out of the program today, is that our rights, our freedoms, not just our religious rights, not just our rights as Christians, but as our rights as Americans, especially if you have a different view from the university campuses and a lot of our leadership. If you have a different view, then you're not tolerated. And so there's a whole different kind of a concept for the word tolerant today. But our freedoms are under pressure. Our freedoms are being threatened. And I just want to tell you, I appreciate men like Wes Modder, pastor of Stone Church, because he went through the crucible. And in fact, he fought for his rights to his religious beliefs as a Navy chaplain, and he won. And then he made the decision, after he won, to retire from the Navy and to do something else with his life. And Joel Valdez, I appreciate the fact that on a college campus where he's outnumbered many times over, he feels that it's important to stand up for his rights as a journalist, his constitutional rights for free speech. And we need to come alongside people like Joel and people like Pastor Modder and stand for our freedoms. It is absolutely important. We cannot capitulate at this time in our history. We must stand strong. Thanks for joining me. God bless you. See you next time.